The boarding line for our Dubai flight had barely moved when my son leaned in close enough that only I could hear him. "Dad," he whispered, "don't let Mom talk on the plane. She already sold the house for the party." I laughed. I actually laughed, because for half a second I thought it was a joke. The kind of thing my son Marcus Bregman said when he was nervous about something bigger. And in 3 hours, we were supposed to be 35,000 feet over the ocean, flying to his own engagement party in Dubai. Then I looked at his face, and there was no joke in it. There was something else, something careful. Behind me, my wife, Carol Bregman, was juggling her passport and boarding pass for that same Dubai flight, completely unaware that her son had just said her name like an accusation. 34 years I spent running into burning buildings without hesitating. I never once froze. I froze at the gate, boarding pass in my hand, watching the agent scan tickets for a flight I suddenly wasn't sure I wanted to be on. Because if what Marcus said was true, the house on Larchmont Drive, the house Carol and I built our whole life inside of, was gone, sold, without me knowing, without me signing anything, sold, apparently, to pay for the very party we were flying 10 hours to attend. And if it wasn't true, then my son had just looked me in the eye and lied about his own mother 30 seconds before boarding a flight where none of us could leave, none of us could check, and none of us could walk away. The gate agent called our row for the Dubai flight one final time. I had 2 people I loved standing on either side of me, and only one of them was telling the truth. I just didn't know which one yet, and I had 10 hours in the air to find out. If you've ever had a moment where someone you trusted completely made you question everything in a single sentence, stay with me, because what I found out over the Atlantic changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. My name is Harold Bregman. Most people who know me call me Hal, except for the guys I used to work with, who still call me Chief out of habit, even 4 years after I hung up my helmet for good. I spent 34 years with the Dayton Fire Department, the last 11 of them as battalion chief. You learn something in that job that never leaves you. You learn how to walk into chaos and stay calm, how to make a decision in 4 seconds that other people would need 4 hours to make. I was good at it. I was good at it because I trusted my training, and I trusted the people standing next to me. I trusted people the same way at home. Carol and I got married 39 years ago, back when I was 26 and thought I knew everything, and she was smart enough to let me believe it for about a year before setting me straight. She spent 3 decades as a school nurse at Fairmont Elementary, patching up scraped knees and calming down panicked kindergartners. And somewhere in there, she patched up plenty of my own bad days too. We bought the house on Larchmont Drive the year Rebecca was born. Marcus came 4 years after that. We raised both of them under that roof, and when Robert, my own father, passed, I remember standing in that kitchen and thinking, this is the only address that's ever felt like the center of the world. Rebecca grew into someone sharp and steady, a forensic accountant now, married, settled in Columbus, the kind of daughter who calls just to check in and somehow always asks the one question you were hoping nobody would ask. Marcus grew into someone different, charming from the time he could talk, the kind of kid teachers remembered fondly and worried about privately. He always wanted more than what we had. Nicer things, bigger rooms, better versions of everything. And I never saw that as a flaw. I saw it as ambition. I encouraged it. When he moved to Chicago for event marketing, when he started dating Amara Osei, a woman from a well-known Dubai business family, I was proud. I told everyone at the Firehouse reunion that my son was marrying up, and I said it like a joke, but I meant it like a compliment. I never once, in 33 years, doubted anything Marcus told me. That morning at the gate was the first time in his life I looked at my son and genuinely didn't know if I could believe him. We found our seats. Carol by the window, me in the middle, Marcus 1 row back with Amara, who was already asleep against the headrest before we'd even pushed back from the gate. The seatbelt sign clicked on. The plane began to taxi. And I sat there for 11 minutes without saying a single word to my own wife, because I didn't know how to ask the question sitting in my chest. Carol finally noticed. She always notices. "You've been quiet since the gate," she said, folding her hands over her lap. "What's wrong?" I could have let it go. Part of me wanted to. But 34 years of walking into houses that were on fire teaches you that the longer you wait to check a room, the worse it gets. "Marcus told me something," I said, "before we boarded." Her face didn't change right away, and that was the first thing I noticed. No flicker, no guilt, nothing you'd expect from someone hiding a lie. "Okay," she said slowly. "What did he tell you?" "He said you sold the house." For a second, Carol just looked at me the way she used to look at kids in her nurse's office who told her their stomach hurt when it clearly didn't, trying to figure out if I was serious. Then she laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the sound someone makes when the ground shifts slightly under their feet and they're trying to pretend it didn't. "Hal, I didn't sell anything. I haven't signed a single piece of paper on that house since your surgery, since my surgery, since April." She caught her own slip, and I felt something cold move through my chest. "Why would he say that?" "He said it was for the party." Carol's hand found the armrest between us and gripped it. "I don't understand. I would know if I sold our house, Hal. I would remember doing that. That should have settled it. It should have been enough. 39 years of marriage, a lifetime of trust, a woman who had never once lied to me about anything that mattered. But I kept thinking about Marcus's face at the gate, how certain he'd looked, how specific the detail was. For the party. Not a guess. Not a rumor. A fact, stated flatly, by a son warning his father not to let his mother talk. "Then why would he say it like that?" I asked. "Why would he warn me not to let you talk about it?" Carol didn't answer right away. She turned toward the window, and in the reflection of the glass I could see her face doing the thing it did whenever she was trying to solve something that didn't make sense yet. The same look she got when a kid came into her office with symptoms that didn't add up to any illness she recognized. "I don't know," she finally said. "But Hal, something is wrong, and we're going to be in the air for 10 hours before either of us can find out what it is." Behind us, one row back, Marcus had put his headphones on and closed his eyes, and I remember thinking that a man with nothing to hide doesn't fall asleep that fast. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I paid $18 for Wi-Fi I almost never use, because I needed to hear another voice besides the two sitting near me. Rebecca picked up on the second ring, which told me she'd been half expecting a call like this for longer than I realized. "Dad, thank God," she said, before I'd even finished explaining. "I've been trying to reach Mom for 2 days about something, and she hasn't answered." That stopped me cold. 2 days about what? A letter came to my house. I don't even know why it came to mine instead of yours. Maybe a forwarding mix-up. From a title company. Cedar Point Acquisitions. It referenced a property closing on Larchmont Drive. Rebecca's voice had the same flat, careful tone she used when she was reading a spreadsheet that didn't balance. I figured it was junk mail. Some investor scam letter. Until I looked up the company. And it's real, Dad. It's a real closing. Filed 3 weeks ago. Beside me, Carol had gone very still, listening to my half of the conversation with her hand pressed against her mouth. "Field with whose signature?" I asked, and I already hated the question before I finished asking it. "I don't have the documents in front of me. I only have the letter." "But Dad..." Rebecca paused in a way she never paused, not when she was delivering bad financial news to strangers for a living. "I need you to think back. Did Mom sign anything back in April, around her surgery?" And that's when it hit me. The memory I'd been circling without landing on since the moment Marcus whispered in that boarding line. April. Carol's gallbladder surgery. She was groggy for 3 days afterward, barely able to hold a spoon steady, let alone read fine print. Marcus had flown in from Chicago that week, the dutiful son, I'd thought at the time, taking 2 weeks off work to help out around the house while his mother recovered. He'd handled the mail. He'd handled calls from the insurance company. He'd sat at our kitchen table with a folder of papers he said were for power of attorney, just in case. Standard stuff for people our age. And Carol, still half sedated from painkillers, had signed where he pointed. I remembered thinking it was thoughtful of him. I remembered being proud. "Carol," I said quietly, turning to her. "Do you remember signing something for Marcus in April? A power of attorney form?" Her eyes went distant, searching. "I remember him bringing papers. I remember him saying it was just so he could help with the insurance company while I was out of it. Hal, I don't remember reading it. I could barely hold my head up that week." Rebecca's voice came back through the phone, quieter now. "A limited power of attorney is exactly the kind of document someone could use to authorize a property sale, Dad, if it had the right language in it, if nobody read it carefully." I looked over my shoulder, one row back. Marcus's eyes were still closed, headphones still on, but his hand, resting on the armrest, wasn't relaxed the way a sleeping man's hand should be. It was closed into a loose fist. "Rebecca," I said, "I need you to find out everything you can about that sale. Who bought it, how much, and whose name is on the paperwork authorizing it." "I'm already on it," she said. "Dad, I think Marcus needs money. A lot of it, fast. I don't know why yet, but nobody sells a paid-off house in 3 weeks unless somebody's desperate." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark of that cabin, engines humming beneath us. 6 more hours to Dubai, and for the first time in my life, I looked at the back of my son's sleeping head and felt something I had never once felt toward him in 33 years: suspicion. We landed in Dubai a little after 10 at night, local time, into a terminal so bright and polished it felt like walking into a different planet, one where nothing was supposed to be wrong. Amara's family had sent a driver to meet us, a quiet man holding a tablet with our names on it. And for 20 minutes, I had to stand there making pleasant small talk about the flight, while my son smiled beside his fiancée like a man with nothing on his mind but the party 3 days away. I excused myself the moment we reached the hotel lobby, telling Carol I needed air. What I actually needed was privacy, because my phone had lit up the second we landed with a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, and something told me not to listen to it in front of Marcus. It was Daniel Kruger, our estate attorney back home. Rebecca had called him within an hour of getting off the phone with me. "Hal, call me back the second you get this, no matter the time," his voice said. "It's about the house." I stepped out into the heat of the hotel courtyard, palm trees lit up gold against the dark, and called him back with my hand shaking slightly against my ear. "I pulled the closing documents," Daniel said, no small talk, which told me how serious this was. He'd known me 20 years. He always started with a joke. "Not tonight. Hal, the power of attorney Carol signed in April, the one Marcus had her sign. It's real. It's notarized. But the notary listed on it, a name in Illinois, doesn't match any licensed notary in the state database." I checked twice. Meaning what? Meaning either the notarization was falsified, or someone impersonated a notary to make the document look legitimate. Either way, that document authorized a sale of real property using a signature obtained while your wife was, by her own medical records, 3 days post-surgery and on prescribed opioids. Daniel paused. "Hal, I don't say this lightly. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is forgery, or something very close to it." The courtyard around me kept being beautiful. String lights, the sound of a fountain, laughter from some rooftop bar above, while the actual floor of my life quietly gave out. "The buyer," I said. "Cedar Point Acquisitions. Who are they?" "A cash flip investment group. They bought the house 22% under market value, which is typical for that kind of fast, no-inspection sale. The funds were wired 11 days ago." Daniel's voice dropped lower. "Hal, I traced where they went. 60,000 into an event company retainer. Amara's family's wedding planner, based here in Dubai. The rest went to pay down a business loan that's 4 months delinquent. Something called Bregman Creative Ventures." I didn't recognize the name. My own son had built a company I'd never heard of, watched it fail, and buried the wreckage under our house without telling a single person who loved him. "He never told any of us," I said, mostly to myself. There's one more thing, Daniel said, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully now. The letter that went to Rebecca's address instead of yours. That wasn't a mistake, Hal. I checked the closing paperwork. The forwarding address on file was changed intentionally, 3 weeks before closing. Someone didn't want you finding out about this until it was already done. I stood there a long time after we hung up, staring at nothing, replaying every version of my son I thought I knew. The boy who used to ride on my shoulders at fire department picnics. The man who called me proud names in front of his coworkers. The son who, 3 hours ago, had smiled at his future in-laws like a man without a single debt to his name. Behind me, through the glass doors of the lobby, I could see Carol sitting alone on a couch, still in her travel clothes, waiting for me to come back and tell her whether she was a liar or a victim. I walked back inside knowing the answer, and knowing it was going to break something in this family that no amount of time was going to fully repair. I told Carol everything in the elevator up to our room, because I didn't trust myself to hold it in 1 second longer. And I watched 39 years of a marriage rearrange itself on her face in real time. First confusion, then something that looked almost like relief, because at least now the sick feeling in her stomach had a name. Then the relief collapsed into something worse. Grief. Not for the house. For her son. He let me think I was losing my mind, she said quietly, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed. For 2 days he let me sit there wondering if I'd done something and forgotten it. I didn't have anything to say to that, so I did the only thing that felt useful. I called Frank. Frank Petrosky and I came up through the department together. 30 years of pulling each other out of situations neither of us should have walked into. And if there was one man on earth who could tell me whether I was overreacting, it was him. It was almost 4 a.m. back in Dayton when he picked up. And he didn't complain once about the hour. Say that again, he said, after I laid it out. Slower, I said it again. Forged notarization, falsified forwarding address, a failed business with Marcus's name on it, $60,000 of my dead equity paying for canapes, and a string quartet 3 days from now. Frank was quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Hal, he finally said, you remember the Castellano fire? The one where the father wouldn't let us into the back bedroom because he swore his kid wasn't in there? I remember. You didn't listen to him. You went in anyway because your training told you something the man standing in front of you couldn't admit to himself. Frank's voice was steady, the way it always was when he was talking someone down off a ledge, professionally or otherwise. You've been ignoring your own training for 33 years when it comes to that boy. Not because you're stupid, because you love him. But Hal, you already know what's behind the door. You've known since the gate. I sat with that for a long moment, looking out the hotel window at a skyline that didn't belong to me, thinking about every time over the years I'd smoothed something over for Marcus. A car he wrecked in college that I quietly helped pay off. A temporary loan 2 years ago that never got mentioned again. The way I always found a story that let him stay the golden version of himself in my head. I hadn't just failed to see this. I had built the conditions that made it possible. What do? I asked Frank, and it came out smaller than I meant it to. You do what you did every single shift for 34 years, he said. You stop asking what you wish was true, and you deal with what actually is. I hung up and looked over at Carol, who had stopped crying and was now sitting very straight. Very still, in the particular way she used to sit when she was about to walk into a classroom and tell a parent something they didn't want to hear. He's going to stand in that room in 3 days, she said, in front of Amara's entire family, and act like none of this happened. I know. So what are we going to do about it? For the first time since the boarding gate, I felt something steady itself in my chest. Not the shock from before, not grief, but the old, familiar feeling of a plan forming. We're going to let him have his party, I said, and then we're going to tell the truth in the one place he can't control it. I found Marcus alone the next evening, out on the hotel terrace, checking his phone with the particular intensity of a man watching numbers he didn't want to see. Amara had gone with her mother to a fitting. Carol stayed upstairs because she said she needed to hear this without her face giving anything away first. "Dad?" He smiled when he saw me. The same easy smile he'd had since he was 7 years old, the one that used to make report cards and fender benders disappear. "Everything okay? You've been weird since we landed. Sit down, Marcus." Something in my voice took the smile off his face faster than anything I'd said in years. "I talked to Daniel," I said. "I know about the power of attorney. I know about the notary that doesn't exist. I know about Cedar Point, and the wire transfer, and Bregman Creative Ventures. And I know $60,000 of your mother's equity is sitting in an event planner's account 3 blocks from here." I watched my son's face do something I had never seen it do before. It didn't perform. For one honest second, before he caught himself, he just looked exhausted. A man who had been carrying something heavy for so long that being caught almost felt like relief. Then the mask came back up. "It wasn't like that," he said. "The business, I had a deal fall through in February, a huge one, and I was going to lose everything. My apartment, the engagement, Amara's family. Dad, you don't understand how they look at money, how they look at failure." I panicked. I meant to fix it before anyone found out. I was going to pay it back before Mom ever needed the house. "You forged your mother's signature." "I didn't forge anything. I used the power of attorney she signed. She signed it 3 days out of surgery, Marcus. And you know it, because you're the one who chose that week to bring her the papers." My voice came out lower than I expected. The voice I used to use walking into a room that was about to flash over. The one that didn't leave space for argument. "And at the gate, you didn't warn me about yourself. You pointed at your mother. You let me sit on a plane for 10 hours wondering if my wife had lied to me, so that I wouldn't look at you." Marcus's jaw tightened. For a moment I saw something almost like anger, the old instinct to turn and make this someone else's fault, and then it drained out of him, and what was left underneath was just a 33-year-old man who looked, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely afraid of his father. "I didn't know what else to do," he said quietly. "If Amara's family found out I was broke, if they found out the business failed, Dad, they were already asking questions about whether I could provide for her the way she's used to. I thought if the party was perfect, none of it would matter. It mattered the moment you decided your mother's name was worth spending to protect yours." He didn't have an answer for that. Out past the terrace railing, the city glittered on, indifferent. Party lights already being tested for an event 3 days away that I now understood was built entirely on a lie. "What happens now?" he finally asked, and for the first time, he sounded like a child again, not manipulative, not performing, just scared. "Now," I said, standing up, "you're going to find out what it feels like when the people who love you stop covering for you." I left him there on the terrace, alone with his phone and his numbers, and walked back inside to tell Carol that our son had finally told the truth, just not enough of it, and not in time to matter. Back in the room, Carol was waiting by the window, and I told her everything. Every word, every excuse, every flicker of fear I'd seen cross our son's face. She listened without interrupting, the same way she used to listen to a child in her office describe a symptom she already suspected the cause of, letting the whole story come out before she said a word. "He's not going to confess in front of Amara's family," she said finally. "Not on his own. He'll smile through that party and figure out how to fix it later, quietly, the way he's fixed everything his whole life. I know. So we don't wait for him to do the right thing." Carol's voice had steadied into something I recognized, the tone she used to take with a principal who wanted to sweep something under the rug. "We make sure the truth is standing in the room, whether he invites it or not." I called Rebecca first. It was morning in Columbus, and she picked up already sounding like she'd been up half the night, which, it turned out, she had. "I've been building the paper trail since last night," she said. "Daniel sent me the closing documents, the wire records, the loan statements for Bregman Creative Ventures. Dad, it's all there. Dates, amounts, the falsified notary stamp. It's not circumstantial, it's documented. I can have a full summary ready by tomorrow, something Daniel can act on the second we're back in the States. I don't want to destroy him, I said, and I meant it, even now. I want him to face what he did. Those aren't the same thing. They're not, Rebecca agreed. Facing it means the house sale gets legally challenged and probably reversed, since Mom's consent wasn't valid. It means he pays back what he stole, one way or another. It doesn't mean we have to end our relationship with him to do that. But Dad, he needs to hear it from the people who matter most to him, in the moment it costs him something. Otherwise, he'll just apologize and drift right back to the next version of this. Daniel called an hour later with the same conclusion from a different angle. Legally, we have grounds to void the sale entirely, given the invalid notarization and evidence of a diminished capacity to consent, he said. Cedar Point won't want a public fraud claim attached to their name. Companies like that fold fast when the paperwork's this dirty. I can have documents ready to file the day you land. But Hal, you should know, once we file, this becomes real in a way that can't be walked back quietly. Marcus's name goes on record. I looked over at Carol, who had been listening on speaker, arms crossed, jaw set in the exact expression she used to wear the day she caught a teacher's aide stealing from the supply closet and refused to let it slide just to keep the peace. File it, she said. Quietly isn't what got us here. Quietly is what he was counting on. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in the dark of that hotel room, listening to Carol's breathing beside me, and thought about the party in 2 days. The string quartet, Amara's family in their finest. My son standing up to make a toast in a room built on money that wasn't his to spend. For the first time in my life, I wasn't dreading a confrontation because I was afraid of losing. I was dreading it because some part of me still loved the boy on the other side of it, and I knew that after tomorrow night, nothing between us would ever be simple again. The engagement party was held in a ballroom overlooking the Gulf, floor-to-ceiling windows turning the whole room gold with the last of the sunset, round tables dressed in white. A string quartet tuning quietly in the corner, exactly like Marcus had described it to me weeks ago, back when I still thought I was just proud of him. Amara's family had spared nothing. Her father, Idris Osei, greeted me with the warm, formal handshake of a man who had built his fortune the hard way and respected people who'd done the same. Her mother asked me twice about my years with the fire department, delighted, calling me the chief within 10 minutes like it was already a family nickname. I kept thinking, they have no idea what they're celebrating. Marcus found me near the bar an hour in, his tie loosened, a drink in his hand he'd barely touched. Dad, he said quietly, whatever you're planning, please, not here, not in front of her family. I'm asking you as your son. You didn't extend your mother the same courtesy at the airport, I said, and walked past him toward the small stage where the microphone stood waiting for the toasts. I want to say I planned the exact words. I hadn't. I'd only planned to stand up when Idris invited family to speak, which he did, warmly, gesturing toward me as the groom's father, a man of 34 years' service to his city. I walked up to that microphone with Carol's hand briefly squeezing mine as I passed her table, and Rebecca's voice steady in my ear from the phone call an hour earlier. Tell the truth plainly, Dad. Don't perform it, just say what happened. And I looked out at a room full of people who loved my son for a version of him that wasn't entirely real. Thank you, Idris, Amara, for welcoming our family this way, I began, and the room settled, expecting the usual, a toast, a joke, a memory of Marcus as a boy. I want to tell you a true story about my son, because I think you deserve to know the man you're bringing into your family. I felt Marcus go rigid somewhere behind me. 2 weeks ago, my wife Carol unknowingly signed a document while recovering from surgery. A document our son used to sell our family home without her real knowledge or consent, using a falsified notarization to cover a business debt he'd been hiding from all of us. $60,000 of that sale helped pay for this party. I kept my voice level, the way I used to when I had to tell a family their house wasn't salvageable, and there was no gentler way to say it. At the airport, when he found out I might learn the truth, He didn't confess. He warned me not to trust his mother instead. The silence that followed had weight to it, the kind you could feel pressing against your ears. Amara's face had gone pale and still, her eyes moving from me to Marcus, waiting for him to say it wasn't true. He didn't. He couldn't. His silence answered for him. "I'm not telling you this to humiliate my son," I continued. And this part I hadn't planned, but it came out true the moment I said it. "I'm telling you because I spent 34 years pulling people out of situations they thought they could hide from. And the one thing I learned is that the fire always finds the truth eventually. Better it finds it here, tonight, surrounded by people who can help him face it, than years from now when it's buried even deeper." I set the microphone down. Nobody clapped. Nobody was supposed to. Idris Osei stood slowly, and for a long moment I genuinely didn't know which direction the room was about to break. Then he walked past his stunned daughter, past the frozen quartet, straight to Marcus, and spoke low enough that only those closest could hear, though I caught enough of it. "In my family, a man who lies to his own mother has already told us who he'll be as a husband." Amara didn't say a word to Marcus that night. She simply stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out onto the terrace alone. Her mother following a moment later, leaving my son standing under gold lighting he'd stolen to pay for, in a room that had just watched every carefully built version of him come apart. Carol reached me first, taking my hand, and I realized my own hands were shaking, not from doubt, but from the particular exhaustion of finally, after 2 impossible days, putting down something I'd been carrying since the boarding gate. "It's done," she said quietly. "No," I said, watching Marcus standing alone in the wreckage of his own party. "It's just starting." We flew home 4 days later, 3 seats instead of the 4 we'd flown out with. Marcus stayed behind in Dubai, whether to salvage what he could with Amara or simply because he couldn't face walking through Dayton Airport with us, I never asked. Amara texted Rebecca once, briefly, to say the engagement was off. She didn't blame us. She thanked Rebecca, of all people, for the paper trail. Said it was the only reason her family believed her instincts instead of Marcus's excuses. Daniel Kruger filed the challenge to the sale within 48 hours of us landing, exactly as promised. The falsified notarization made it almost simple. In the end, Cedar Point Acquisitions, facing the possibility of a fraud claim attached to their name in county records, agreed to unwind the sale rather than fight it in court. It took 6 weeks of paperwork, 6 weeks of Carol and me sitting across from Daniel's desk, going over documents I never imagined I'd need to read this closely about my own house. But in October, the deed came back into our names. I stood in the driveway on Larchmont Drive the day it was finalized, looking at a house that had never actually left, not physically, but that had felt, for 2 months, like it belonged to strangers. Carol came out and stood beside me without saying anything, because after 39 years, she knew there are some moments that don't need narration. Marcus called in November. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the terrace in Dubai. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he said, before I could ask. "I know I don't get to do that anymore. I wanted you to know I'm working 2 jobs out here, paying back what I can, starting with what I owe you and Mom. Daniel already has the arrangement in writing. I signed it myself, this time. No one signed anything for me." "That's a start," I said, and I meant it exactly that plainly. Not forgiveness, not absolution, a start. "I know I can't undo the airport," he said, quieter now. "I keep thinking about it." I looked you in the eye and pointed at Mom instead of myself. I don't know how to explain what kind of person does that except to say I was scared, and being scared made me someone I don't want to be. "Then don't be him anymore," I said. "That's the only justice that's ever actually meant anything, Marcus. Not what happens to you, what you decide to become because of it." He didn't have an answer for that, not yet. I didn't expect one. Some debts get repaid in installments too small to notice for a long time. That first Thanksgiving without Marcus at the table was quieter than any we'd had in 30 years. Rebecca came with her husband, and we sat an empty chair anyway, not as a statement, just because old habits don't unlearn themselves in one season. Carol caught me looking at it twice during dinner and reached over, under the table, and squeezed my hand, not to comfort me exactly, but to say I see it too. Something had shifted between Carol and me since Dubai, something I hadn't expected. We'd been married 39 years, and I thought I already knew every version of loving her there was to know. But watching her stand in that ballroom, steady and clear-eyed, while her own son let a room full of strangers believe she was the liar, and then watching her forgive him for it faster than I could, while still holding him fully accountable, taught me something about her strength I'd apparently never needed to see before. "You never once got angry at me for doubting you," I told her one night in December, the two of us on the back porch in coats, the way we used to sit when the kids were small and the house still felt too loud for quiet moments like this. On the plane, I sat there wondering if you'd lied to me. "You'd have been a fool not to wonder," she said. "Your son looked you in the eye and told you something specific and certain. I'd have wondered too, in your seat." She was quiet a moment. "What I needed wasn't for you to never doubt me. I needed you to find the truth once you did, and you did." Rebecca had taken to calling every Sunday, not out of worry the way she used to when Marcus's chaos was the family's constant weather, but just to talk. The conversations lighter than they'd been in years, freed of the low hum of managing her brother's next crisis. Marcus called every few weeks. Short calls, mostly about the repayment, sometimes about nothing at all. A question about how the Bengals were doing, a memory from a fishing trip when he was 12. He didn't ask to come home for Christmas. I didn't invite him. We both understood, without saying it, that some doors don't get slammed shut. They just take longer to open again than either side wants. It's been a little over a year now since that morning at the gate. The house on Larchmont Drive is still ours, repainted last spring, the same shade of blue it's always been, because Carol said some things don't need reinventing, just protecting. People ask me sometimes, old friends from the department mostly, how I knew to trust my gut on that plane instead of just believing whichever story was easiest to believe. I tell them the truth. I didn't know. I spent 10 hours over the ocean not knowing, terrified I'd choose wrong, terrified I'd either doubt an innocent woman or defend a guilty son. What got me through it wasn't certainty. It was the same thing that got me through 34 years of walking into rooms I couldn't see the end of. You don't wait until you're sure. You follow what the evidence tells you, one piece at a time, and you stay honest about what you find, even when it costs you something you love. It cost me a version of my son I'd spent 33 years protecting without ever really seeing, but it gave me back a wife I trusted completely, a daughter who never once wavered, and a truth I could finally stand inside without flinching. Marcus is coming for Easter this year. First time since Dubai. Carol's already planning the meal like it's any other Sunday, though I know it isn't, and I know she knows it too. I don't know exactly what kind of man my son is going to become. I only know that whichever one shows up at that door in the spring, I'll be looking at him clearly this time. That's all any of us can really ask for. Not a perfect ending, just an honest one.